Good evening and welcome along. Is Home Secretary Yvette Cooper fit for purpose? She's had a few major flashpoints to deal with since taking the role, and I think she's messed them all up. Let's deal with Southport first. It now seems absolutely clear that she knew in the aftermath of the attack about Axel Rudikabana's violent history, prevent referrals, the fact that he had a jihadi training manual and a biological weapon in the shape of some ricin in his possession. Starmer himself admitted to knowing.
Yes, I knew the details as they were emerging. That is the usual practice in a case such as this. But you know and I know that it would not have been right to disclose those details.
Surely she knew too. Surely she knew when she did this. But this critical information was not disclosed, which means that while misinformation fueled the summer disorder, she was sitting on information that could have, in my view, prevented that disorder. Now, she says it's because she didn't want to prejudice the case.
We have been keen to publish the information on prevent referrals from the start, but throughout, the advice to us has been clear. If we had ignored the advice that we were given from about the case that put towards us and about the information that the police and the CPS were working through in order to get justice, and if as a result a killer had walked free, no one would ever have forgiven the government or anyone else.
Fine, but did that information vacuum prompt the riots? Some people think so. Now, in the wake of the Manchester airport incident, this was the scene outside Rochdale police station.
We saw you. We know you're in there. Come out, explain yourself. Why has only one officer been suspended? What about the rest of them?
Crickets. Absolute crickets from the Home Secretary on that, as far as I'm aware. I don't think she dealt with that situation very well at all, do you? And then we come to the Pakistani rape gangs. Now, Jess Phillips, of course, who's the minister underneath Yvette Cooper, rejected an inquiry into those gangs. Cue mass outrage, huge uproar. Days went by. Elon Musk got stuck in, famously so, didn't he? We here at GB News had an exclusive poll showing that 73% of the public wanted an inquiry. And then eventually Yvette Cooper comes out and announces a series of local grooming gang inquiries.
Effective local inquiries can delve into far more local detail and deliver more locally relevant answers and change than a lengthy nationwide inquiry can provide. So Tom Crowther, KC, chair of the Telford inquiry, has agreed to work with the government to develop a new framework for victim-centred, locally led inquiries where they are needed, and as a first step, to work with Oldham Council and up to 4 other pilot areas.
So they got it wrong initially, and then they U-turned under pressure. I don't think we can say that she's handled that well. I mean, what else is her job? Oh yeah, stopping the boats. Well, we have seen more than 1,000 illegal immigrants cross the Channel since New Year's Day. She's had several big moments to deal with. Southport, Pakistani rape gangs, illegal immigration. Hasn't she messed them all up? Let's get our thoughts on my panel this evening. We've got columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, GB News presenter Alex Armstrong and the journalist Jonathan Les. Esther, I'll start with you. Do you think Yvette Cooper has basically just messed everything up? I mean, if so, why is she still in her job?
Well, I don't think she should be a Home Secretary for various reasons. But, I mean, if we want to delve into the individual individual situations that she's messed up, I mean, where do we begin? We have to look at this woman's background before we think, why has she messed this all up? Well, because she has no real life experience. This is like much of the cabinet, studied PPE at Oxford, worked as a special advisor, 20-something. You know, in our 20s when we're trying not to burn pasta? Yeah, most of us are not special advisors of anything, but somehow she became a special advisor to senior members of the government at the time, including Harriet Harman. She had 2 years, 2 years of actual work experience outside of politics before she became an MP in 1997. And she's basically done that for her entire life. She has no idea what most people go through. She has any sort of private sector experience. She literally has lived in the politics bubble her entire life. So really, if you're asking why did she mess this up, it's because politics is the kind of arena where you just fail upwards. If she was terrible at her job back then, how would she been fired?
The problem I would argue now for the British public is when you look at a Home Secretary, they have to deal with like the most serious stuff. And so far, I could have included other things there. I don't think she dealt with the Hare Hills riots particularly well either. I mean, I was sat on this sofa doing a live show when that was kicking off. And I was sitting here, it was like, about 11 p.m.ish, roughly speaking, when we finally heard from Yvette Cooper, as far as I can gather. You know, she didn't seem to be coming down anywhere near as hard on that mass public disorder as she was on other things. But
can you name one of her achievements?
No.
For being in politics?
But Jonathan Liss is about to, I imagine, in a few seconds' time. But before that, Alex, you look at those key events that she's had in her short time in office so far. Has she got anything right?
Well, no, it's political prejudice, isn't it? I mean, you just used Hare Hills as an example. Let's compare that to how she responded when the riots kicked off. Well, she was not worried about prejudice in cases then. She was saying people are throwing bricks, they're thugs, they're far right, they're racist. These are words she used. So how can it be that the truth is different in different circumstances?
At that point.
This is exactly
the
what I'm
leading
saying.
politician can prejudice those cases.
Exactly. So how can she sit there and say that one of these cases I don't want to prejudice, when people have actually died, and the other one, well, it doesn't matter the law now. It doesn't make sense to me, Patrick. That's what's getting people so angry about this two-tier justice.
Is Yvette Cooper rubbish at her job, Jonathan?
No, she's not, Patrick, rubbish at her job, and I don't understand the criticisms that all three of you just levelled at her, to be honest.
Prejudice.
No, and also, I don't understand it. You complain that she hasn't launched the local inquiries, then you complain that she's U-turned, so you literally can't, she literally
Why
can't
didn't
get
she do it
anything
from
right.
the start?
Because
she has no judgment.
Politicians respond to pressure all the time, regardless of political colour, as you know perfectly well,
Yvette
Esther.
Cooper has
and I
been,
think it's not
I
fair.
have a question for you. Yvette Cooper has been an MP for 27 years. Can you name one achievement that has actually benefited the country?
Well, what a ridiculous question. She hasn't been in the government for very long. She was a junior minister.
She's had many cabinet positions.
No, she
She's been a special advisor to many
She has not had many cabinet.
Really?
She has not had many cabinet positions.
She was housing secretary for 5 years.
I think we're missing the
She was
point.
housing secretary for 5 years. What improvement did she make to housing in this country?
I haven't been through her entire CV,
We cannot name one achievement of a woman who has been in politics for 27 years.
Please, I'm just going to draw a firm thing on for the rest of the show. Please stop talking over each other, because it is an impossible listen to anyone who's on radio. But Alex, I'll come back in with you on this, because look, we have. I'll tell you what. I'll play a clip now. Of Chris Philp, the Tory shadow Home Secretary. He was sticking it to her in Parliament earlier today. She did clap back with what I actually thought was some very reasonable points. So let's play that clip.
Let me point out to him that the previous Conservative government did not publish information before the trial about the Prevent referral for the perpetrator who killed Sir David Amess. None of us criticised them for that, because none of us wanted to put at risk justice for Sir David's family, nor did they publish information before the trial on the Prevent referral of the asylum seeker who killed Tom Roberts. In fact, they didn't even publish that after the trial.
Yeah, and just on that, specifically the Hartlepool incident that took place that she was alluding to there, where an elderly man was stabbed to death whilst walking his dog. There were massive reporting restrictions on that, huge reporting restrictions. And she does make the case that those were under the Conservatives. So what's different about that when it comes to the Southport incident?
Well, I think the Tories are just as bad in this situation. I mean, a lot of the laws that we're critiquing now, which seem very obvious now that the Tories are out of government, are by them, are by the previous government. They're written into law. Labour's just using them. But the reality is, when we had other cases like the London Bridge terror attacks, for example, Joe Cox's murder, that information was public within 24 hours. It's taken 93 days for the Axel Radicano case to be available to us.
She's not making a case that because the Tories didn't release those Prevent referrals of those criminals that they've done a good job here. The case that she's making is that she didn't want to prejudice the case. Meanwhile, she and her boss, Keir Starmer, who was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, were happy to prejudice other cases, in which case those people hadn't even been charged or certainly not convicted. If the argument of the Southport rioters, the over 400 people that were fast-tracked through the court, so if her argument is we didn't want to prejudice the case, well, I'm sorry, you were happy to prejudice other cases. That's the point here.
No, if you're talking about the rioters, I think it's legitimate. We all have eyes. We can see what's happening.
Oh, but they didn't have eyes when someone was stabbing little girls in broad daylight in view of witnesses.
Look, if the Prime Minister and Home Secretary had identified individuals and said, this individual threw that brick at that police officer and they're scum, that would have been prejudicing a trial.
I'm sorry.
That's
You're
a little
not
bit
understanding what I'm saying.
So to be clear, just so we're really clear, so you, Jonathan, as far as you're concerned, you think she has behaved absolutely correctly throughout this entire Southport process?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, she was tarring all of them with the same brush. She says these were not protests, these were all rioters. So it's a tarring of the same brush, therefore you are prejudicing all of those cases, in my opinion. I think the reality is it's a murder, it's a terrorist attack. It's the same thing. The reality is that if we get back to what's happened here, the PREVENT programme itself is clearly unfit for purpose.
And that's the real point here.
It's obvious to anyone, whether you're Home Secretary or not, that it's failed. And what they've done today, come out and say this is all new terrorism, it's not. And lone wolves have been going around. They killed Joe Cox and David Ames. Lone wolves are not new. Prevent should have been looking at this years ago, and that's a failure of the Conservative Party for 14 years to just like Theresa May.
That is exactly why the Tory Party is going to be trying to distract us over the next few weeks from their own litany of failures over the Prevent scheme.
They certainly have failed.
Putting all the blame on Starmer. You can hate Starmer as much as you want, and Cooper, but they were in office for 3 weeks before the Southport murders. They were not responsible for what happened to this killer while he was a schoolboy in Prevent. That is not on them.
But I think we need to broaden it out from the Prevent programme. This young man, other than being referred to the Prevent programme at the age of 13, so this is almost 5 years ago, he was expelled from school. He admitted to carrying a knife 10 times. His father stopped him a week before from going to stab people in his old school, right? There were so many red flags going off. And we can't just blame the Prevent programme, although that does bear a lot of responsibility. What about the community? What about his family? His father knew that he was capable of going to a school and stabbing kids and persuading him to not do that by stopping him from entering the taxi. What else did the family do to stop this person?
Is the reality? No, you're absolutely right. And I think isn't the reality that Theresa May said multiple times, enough is enough now, we must do something. How many more politicians are going to fail our country before we go, actually, this is just not working?
Well, they just get promoted. That's why you have someone like Yvette Cooper in politics for over 27 years, and no one here can name her achievement that she's had.
No, you didn't even let me finish.
Okay, name an achievement. What was one of her achievements as a Housing Secretary?
I was literally about to. I was going to say that she was a very effective head of the Home Affairs Select Committee.
What does effective mean?
She held ministers to account repeatedly. She held ministers to account all the time in that role. Am I saying that she's one of the greatest ministers who ever lived? No.
You can't even name an achievement.
It's very, very difficult to be a Home Secretary to advertise your achievements unless you're kind of decriminalising homosexuality.
Yeah, but if you've been in a career for 27 years, you can at least name two.
But my view would be she's had several flagship moments. So whether it's been doing anything to stop the boats, and that's not happened. We'll talk about this later on. 1,000 boats crossed since New Year's Day. Whether it's anything to do with the reaction to the way that people reacted to the Manchester Airport incident, the Hare Hills thing, the grooming gangs thing. She seems to have been caught on the hop throughout it, and she seems to be on the back foot over this. And I just wonder if she's up to the job. But we've had a robust discussion on it to kickstart the show. So thank you very much, everyone.